Hello, beautiful Her Drive audience. Today, I want to welcome a woman whose story is as powerful as her mission. Alreen Haeggquist wakes up every day fueled by an unrelenting passion to advocate for women who have endured sexual abuse, harassment, and discrimination. And with 21 years of legal experience and a record of recovering millions for her clients, Alreen has taken on high profile giants to stand for justice. And as you all know, this podcast is all about advocating for women's rights, and it was founded on the principle of telling the stories of women who have been through great levels of adversity and how they've taken on that trauma and really used it as a way to fuel themselves into healing, into growth, and ultimately turning that trauma into something that helps others. And Alreen definitely fits right into that description. I'm so honored to have her as a guest today on Her Drive. Not only is she a lawyer and an advocate, but also an author. So we'll talk all about that. So without further ado, hello, Alreen. Welcome to Her Drive podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a true joy to have you. And, in reading about your story, it was very touching to see such a strong example. And then when I saw what the title of your book was, I was just blown out of the water because it's so much in line, like I said in the intro, about what Her Drive is all about. So I guess I'd love to start. Really, I kind of gave you an intro, but I would love to hear, like, from your own self, how do you describe yourself? Like, what's your elevator pitch when people meet you?
My elevator pitch, I always say I'm a woman's rights attorney. And when I'm talking to survivors, I tell them that I'm a survivor myself. And I know the path that you're on. And it's a journey to heal. So that's my quick elevator pitch if I was going to just meet you there. But a little bit of background, I suffered child sex abuse by the hands of my father and other family members. And in addition to other abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse. And that, weighed on me. That, it has long lasting effects as I got into adulthood. And I just wanted to push it aside. I just wanted to pretend it didn't happen. I wanted to just forget about it. I had, moved on. I'd going to college. I was living a good life. And I just wanted to ignore the abuse that I experienced as a kid. But what I learned is that you can't ignore it. It comes back in various ways, and it affects your mental well-being, but it also affects your physical well-being. And I started having a lot of ailments. And I've been on a very long journey to heal, and then kind of being where I'm at now. I just really wanted to share that with other women who are going through that. Of there is another way, there is another side, and you're going to get there. And so that's the reason for my book, and that's the reason for the work that I do. It all is based on the fact that I've been there, I've had a similar experience, and I've experienced the same feelings that you've had. And I know it's going to require work, but I know you can get to the other side.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a beautiful way of describing what you're doing and giving us a glimpse into your history. Um, I'm curious when, not to like fixate on the past, but when you started to recognize symptoms and could no longer push things down, how is that showing up in your life, and in what ways was it really impacting you physically, emotionally, psychically, that type of thing?
Sure. So I was really angry. I mean, when you would meet me as somebody in the elevator, you have no idea. I would always come across really happy. I was always smiling. Um, very social. And so you would have no idea that I was very rageful on the other side. But the person that got the most of it was, now my husband. We've been together for 28 years. But at the time, I would just get really angry at him, and I would be very rageful, and because it would be triggering to me if I thought he was being, he was lying because of the way, he looked at me. It would trigger that effect. But at the time when he was there, or I was going through this experience with him, I didn't realize it was a trigger from my past, right? It was the anger that I had from being abused that I never let out, right? As a mechanism, I didn't do anything, but that was still trapped inside of me. So it was manifesting in that way of just a lot of anger that I experienced, and the anger that would come out from strangers who I thought were trying to hurt me or trying to hurt somebody I love. And so that would be very triggering to me, and I would get very angry. Um, but kind of what really the physical manifestation is really what got me on on one of the tracks to heal was I had ulcers and I was bleeding constantly, and I bled for over a year and it wouldn't stop. And a doctor that I had, my GI doctor, she just kept telling me I needed to feel, and she had no idea about my past. She had no idea about the trauma experience, but she just kept coming back to, this is you're not feeling and you're not experiencing what you need to, and this is how your body's showing it. And so it was a great doctor to not just give me medication, but she kept repeating that. And it was very frustrating because I didn't know what that meant. Like, what are you talking about not feeling? I'm angry, so I don't know. I feel like I'm feeling. I'm not sure what you mean, but it was feeling the experience of what I had when I was young that I was trying to suppress. And what I've learned through the process is when you try to ignore it and you try to push it down and you try to just make it, like push it aside, like I don't want to, deal with it. Your body's it's gonna show up in the physical manifestation that it does. And the idea is that you have to absorb those feelings. You have to experience what it feels like in order for it to, dissipate. And so it was part of my learning journey. The way I did that with her, the doctor kept telling me, she's like, you should be happy that you're bleeding. It's like your body's literally screaming at you to do something about it, right? And now you have a choice. You have a choice whether to do something about it or continue on this path that you are, which is keeping yourself busy, working a lot, taking care of other people. And that's how I try to ignore my past by just doing other things. And so it was really through her of the repeat thing she would tell me, and then finally doing inner child work. And I did inner child work. I don't know how long ago it was, but that was huge, and that really allowed me to heal from the physical manifestations. The bleeding did stop, and it was just so powerful. And I think it took me a long time to understand the mind body connection. It was part of the learning and healing process for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you loud and clear on all of that, and I love that you had a doctor who had the wisdom to one almost celebrate what was going, or it sounds like just pure celebrate what was going on, and then to present it to you in a way of like you now have a choice. And I think most of us really do ignore until the pain or whatever the experience is just becomes so great that it's almost debilitating in a sense. So I think it's phenomenal. And I hope that we all have doctors who can talk to us more from a holistic standpoint, not just from, oh, take this, I don't know, whatever would heal an ulcer, right? Or diminish the symptoms. So as you were doing the inner child work, actually, for those who don't know what inner child work is, what did that look like for you?
Sure. So I went to a cranial sacral energy worker. I guess is her title, if I'm saying it correctly. But what it looked like is she gave me a massage. She put me in a really relaxed state, and then had me, close my eyes and take me back to when I was a child and what that looked like. And it could be it could be whatever it is for you, wherever it takes you back. And for me, it took me back to when I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, and just terrified in a corner, and what that felt like. And she brought me back to that place. Um, and it's such an interesting experience because I'd never experienced it before. And she took me back there, and then she said, "Okay, we'll have the adult Alreen come to that child And what would you tell her? Right. And so for me, it was going back to my child self at 5, 6 years old, letting her know it's going to be okay. And I'm here for you. Right. It was something that I didn't have. I didn't have an adult in my life protecting me from the things that were going on around me. And so to have an adult come to that child and say, everything's going to be all right. I'm going to take care of you and I'm here for you. The energy released from my body, and I literally felt it from the tips of my toes to the tips of my fingers. And it was so powerful. And it's I can't believe I'm describing it because because it's like, what is happening to your body? But it was so powerful. And that moment really made a lot of difference in kind of the next step of my healing, right? Because that helped with the physical manifestation of what was going on. I still have a lot more work to do, but that release of energy of letting that child know you're going to be okay, there's somebody looking after you, is a description of inner child work.
Beautiful. Thank you. I think
Yeah.
that was such a beautiful, a profound story to share. And I have my own experience with inner child work. And I can tell you I've done a lot of different things. And that is one of the most profound modalities or techniques
Mm-hmm.
that I found. And even just last night, I was doing some inner child stuff when something came up. And I found it interesting that your adult self went and talked to, of course, this younger you in this one scenario. And now with your work, I'm just curious, like when you are connecting with a client who you're representing at your firm, it seems like you're coming from that area of compassion and can bring that energy to them so that they feel seen, they feel safe, they feel whatever it might be that is necessary in order for them to take big steps. Because leaning into my experiences, I've had several sexual assault situations where like the police departments just ignored me. Another time, another gentleman, he was released for this whole thing. There's other times like a partner had said I was making it up. You know what I mean? And I, in those moments, really just wanted an advocate that would be there for me and be like, I'm a fighter. I'm going to fight for you and with you, because it's super disempowering, one, when you've had a traumatic situation and then no one around you, especially the authorities, are really taking it serious. So I want to really go into your work now. And I know you've definitely had some higher profile cases. But I'm curious, like, what is the general formula, if there is one, for what you see with people who are coming up against different forms of abuse, and how you all work with that?
Sure. So when a client comes in, one, we have a survivor advocate on staff. So I'm a lawyer, I'm not trained, besides the training that our survivor advocate gives us on how to be trauma informed, right? When you're a survivor and you've been victimized, the way somebody asks you questions can affect you, right? If all the questions are why questions, why did you do that? Why were you there? Why did you go out late at night? Why were you with him? All of those why questions can be re-traumatizing. And that to me was really powerful to learn, that even just my questioning of, even though I'm very empathetic, even though I've been in that situation, I didn't realize that my questioning of somebody as a client could be affecting them. So the survivor advocate has trained myself and the rest of our team of what a survivor needs when they come into our office, of how we should be asking questions, and how to make them comfortable to provide the information so they know it's safe with us.
So, Loves, last year I made a big decision. And the first was to commit to starting a whole new business and then ramping up production of this very podcast. It was definitely an exciting time. My creativity was flowing and my brain was on. But the downside was I couldn't sleep, and waking up feeling rested was becoming quite an issue. I found myself reaching intermittently for unhealthy energy sources and knew that that just was not sustainable for my ultimate optimized health and wellness. And that's when I started to figure out that there's this idea of mental wealth. Mental wealth is about creating habits that build your resilience, like investing in your future self. Of course, we know about sleep, diet, exercise, and stress management, but most of us aren't aware of smart tools like exogenous compounds that can really play a sharp role. One of those tools I found is Magic Mind. Magic Mind's focus shots have been a lifesaver for my mornings, giving me clean energy without the jittery crash. And at night, their sleep shots help me actually wind down so I can get the kind of rest that fuels my creativity. And this has not been about a quick fix or a magic solution. It's really just enhancing what I'm already doing in my healthy life choices. Since I've added Magic Mind to my routine, I feel so much more balanced. I'm sharper when I need to focus, and I'm actually getting some deep sleep that my busy mind and body deserve. And now they've bundled these amazing shots into a 24 pack so you can experience the same flow from day to night. And to my audience, the beautiful Magic Mind is offering 45% off their 24-hour pack. So you can go ahead and head to www.magicmind.com/herdrivejan, spelled Jan, to grab yours and join me in building your mental wealth this year. And before we sign off, don't forget to check the link in the description to get that exclusive discount. Here's to you feeling rested, focused, and ready to crush your goals in this beautiful year of 2025.
So when a client comes in, I also always tell them that, one, we believe you, we hear you, this is a safe space, and give them choices on how they want to tell their story. Do you want to meet in the conference room? Would you rather meet at your house? Would you rather meet at a coffee shop? So giving them choices on how they present their information is also very important. And then reminding them that what they're going to hear from the other side is what we hear in every single case, right? They always deny it, right? That's the first line is always deny, didn't happen. I don't know what she's talking about. She's making it up, and that's always happened. And it doesn't feel good, but it's not personal to your story. That's how they defend it. They don't know how else to defend themselves. Then when that doesn't work, right, when there's, again, evidence, they just can't deny it anymore. They have to confront the fact that it did happen. The second thing they always do is they say that you wanted it. You asked for it. It was consensual. You agreed to it. You led them on. Whatever it is, it always turns to that. And then finally, when that's not working out, it's to attack, right? It's to attack your credibility. It's to attack who you are. It's to attack your past life. It's to embarrass you. And I know that's hard to hear. And that makes people like, well, I don't want to go through this process, right? But it's reminding them that you're so brave for coming forward in the first place. When you come forward, you not only help yourself, but you're helping other women also step forward. And that you have a team with you. You're not doing it alone, right? You have not only me as your lawyer, you have the survivor advocate, but then my firm has a team, and we're all here to support you in whatever way you need. So you don't have to go into it alone. And I think that's really comforting for people, because I think when you have the experience, and I know I felt this way, you think you're all alone. You don't realize how prevalent it is. You don't realize that it's happened to other people and how many people it's happened to, because the shame of the experience itself makes you feel like it was your fault and you're all alone in this process. So I think just reminding them of that, giving them the statistics and letting them know that they're not alone is I think really important in the process.
Yeah, sure. Why do you think, or have experienced, why there's so much shame for people to come forward?
So the shame is just because it's like to your body, and like we internalize it. I think that's part of the trauma response to it, is to feel shameful by what happened to you, because we're not talking about it. So you think you're all alone. So for me personally, like I didn't know that 50% of women are sexually assaulted. So that was huge. But two, um, you start feeling like, well, I didn't say anything. I didn't leave. I didn't say no. Um, I guess I let it happen. If I really didn't want it, then I would have fought him back, or I would have punched him, or I would have ran, and I didn't do any of those things. So I guess it was my fault. And it's like our own thoughts. And I think there's a societal aspect to it as well, of not, we shouldn't be talking about it, and um, creates that as well. So I don't know what causes shame, but I do know that sexual assault and that experience has a shameful aspect to it that we shouldn't have, but that automatically, goes there. which is
Absolutely.
really making it hard to stand up.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Well, I think there's something very healing about when we do come forward and share it, whether it's someone that's close to us or in whatever capacity. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the healing potential of stepping forward in a state of vulnerability and sharing our experiences.
I mean, I think that's huge. That's my entire motto, is to stop the silence, because I believe that the more you keep it in and you don't say anything, the only person you're hurting is yourself. And the only person that's being impacted is you. And you'll continue that cycle until you start talking about it. So that's the reason I wrote my book. That's the reason I came out with it, because I feel so strongly about the fact that you have to stand up for yourself. And it could be different in different ways. Like for me, standing up for myself was coming out with my book. We had kept this family secret about my dad. I mean, I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and so or I'm the youngest of 10 kids, 6 girls. And, we've had this family secret for, I don't know how long, right? Generations. And for me, standing up for myself was to say, no more. I'm not keeping this a secret anymore. And I'm letting it out. And because you can't be traumatized by speaking out, right? Because there's a lot of like, well, how's my family going to treat me? Who am I going to hurt? What is it going to, what are people going to think of me? Is anybody going to still like me? And all of those thoughts come to you. However, I promise you, you will be better off by speaking out. And the reason I know that is not only from my own personal experience, but from representing women for all of these years. So, all of the women at the end of the case, they are empowered because they're no longer letting somebody else, continue to harm them, even though they already did, right? And I see that from every woman that comes in, with the way they start. When they step into my office, that fear, the shame, like, how am I going to do this? And then when they leave and they know they can go forward and stand up for themselves in the next situation. So I feel very strongly about stepping forward. How do you do it? I always tell people, like, just start just writing it in a journal, right? Just write about your experience to yourself. That is still letting it out. You don't have to, file a lawsuit. You don't have to go on the news, but even just writing it out yourself in a journal, is letting it out from just eating you up on the inside.
Hmm. Mm. Oh, that's such sound advice. Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm curious, when you were writing your book, did you come up against any like limiting beliefs or fears that were almost debilitating at any point, or were you decided, like, I'm writing this book, there's nothing that's going to stop me, here we go?
I think that lasted throughout. So the first part was just the act of like writing it out, right? There's no editing that goes into it. It's just writing it out. And it was really emotional, I would say. Each time, um, I would either cry, and it would bring up other memories as you're going through the process that weren't in your conscious level. And it would bring up other stories and other things you would remember of things that happened. And so um, it was emotional, but at the same time, very therapeutic, because each edit, and as I read through it, it had less of an impact on me. Like the fact that I'm on a podcast talking about it, I mean, that I could not have done, you know, at the beginning when I started writing my book. That was like, I never verbalized anything. I never said, yeah. So I never, orally said, my dad abused me. Like that just didn't come out of my mouth. And so to go from that place where I couldn't even talk about it to where I'm at now is part of the journey. And that's what I try to remind women, like, you're kind of at the first step of it, right? And it's going to take a while. And so this idea that it's like overnight, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. But I can tell you that you can live the life you want if you do the work, right? It's going to
Mm.
require effort on your part, but then you can live the life that you're wanting and not be kind of stuck where you're at thinking like you deserve it and you're meant to be here. It's like you're not. You had an experience. I'm sorry you had it. I wish I could change it or take it back, but we can't. And so we've been dealt with it, and now we have to do something about it. And that's actually a whole chapter in my book. It's like, you didn't make the mess, but you got to clean it up. Like, we have to fix it, like, that's it. And when you do, it's amazing of you'll find that power that is innately in you, to be back.
Yeah. I think that's also beautifully stated. In reflection, the last couple of years and on my experiences, I thought with the first one that happened, I was like, well, I didn't fight back. And like, I'm a strong person. But then, I ran the scenario in so many different parts of my head. And like, I'm kind of have a fighter instinct, but I was just so shocked. But anyway, and then I went on to how that impacted me the next time it happened. And then I did fight back. And then I ended up being hurt very badly, and had to have surgeries and all this stuff. And, in reflecting on all of that, it made me think like, wow, me who is, I have like a family who loves me. I live in the United States. Like, there's certain systems and things set up for success for me. Even I had a hard time coming forward. And when I came forward the second time, this man was ultimately released. Right. So even when you do the right thing, it's the right thing, it seems like there's limited avenues of success. Right. And I was thinking of so much about other people who've been victimized, and they're stuck, I would imagine, somewhat in like this freeze response. And it's like, and now you're being re-victimized if you are being asked those just why questions, as you stated, which I'd never heard about before, and then made to feel like it was actually all your fault, whether that's a societal thing, the way you're being questioned, or even just your own internal dialogue. So I'm curious with your work, like, what is the intersection between like justice and empowerment, and how can people be, even though you're so, I would say, almost crippled in a sense in these experiences, how can you find that sliver of empowerment so you can actually move forward in interacting with the justice system that leads to hopefully an outcome that I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but an outcome, I guess, using justice again, like it's a justified end to a traumatic experience or series of experiences.
So in our justice system, there's two parts, right? There's the criminal justice system and there's the civil justice system. So in the criminal justice system, you can get somebody to, go behind bars or pay a fine. In the civil justice system, it's money for you because of the harm that you experience. I work in the civil justice system. Neither one, has this empowerment piece to it. But I think it's by doing the work of filing the lawsuit, standing up to the person who harmed you and saying, no, it was not okay, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. That's the empowerment piece, that comes from just taking the first act. And that's why I always say, like, the first act of just even coming to my office, and saying, I'm going to call a lawyer and see what my rights are. Like, that's an action that you took to empower yourself to understand what your rights are, and to find, and then you get to decide what you want to do with it. It's your choice then whether you want to move forward with it or not. I'm here to advise you on what your rights are and what you can do. And then you decide, do you want to do it? Do you want to file a suit or not? And then if you do want to file a suit, what does that look like, for you? And so to me, the empowerment is coming because you're taking a stand and not just saying, all right, well, it happened and I'm going to just, move along. It's finding out what you can do and then deciding whether you want to or not.
Got it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Um, I'm curious your thoughts on, these big name cases where, well, I mean, like, the first one that comes to mind, of course, is like Harvey Weinstein, right? There's all of these women that came forward, right? And then I think his case was dismissed, I think, because too many people were included. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
it was, I know, right? It was reversed because the judge allowed evidence in of Me Too witnesses,
Yeah,
which is what we call it. And so the court reversed the judgment and they have to now retry the case.
got it. Okay, okay, okay. So when I saw that, I had such mixed emotions. One being, wow, so many women and I wasn't shocked, but I was like so happy that so many women actually came forward. And then I felt sad because I'm like, well, the judge decided this. Is that really their fault? Like, this to me just shows how even more guilty, this person is. But from a legal viewpoint, I'm curious what your lens is and how you could help frame it for victims who might say, well, why would I even bother coming forward? Because we're seeing these big name cases and it doesn't seem like justice is being served when it's almost obvious that there was a lot of harm done.
Yep. So I would tell them that that was just one decision, right? He's staying behind bars. It's not affecting his prison term. The judge has to look at whether or not the jury received proper evidence. And so the judge is saying the jury received, um, well, prejudicial evidence that it shouldn't have. And so therefore, that's why it has to be retried. Do I think it's right? No, but and primarily because now these women have to tell their story again, right? Like that's you've said it once and now you don't want to do it again. So I feel bad for them in that sense. But I would say you have created so much. I mean, the Me Too movement is huge. I mean, you have given power to so many people feeling like they can come forward, whereas before they couldn't. So justice doesn't always come, I don't think, in a courtroom or by that trial. I feel like justice comes from so many other ways. One, justice came from the fact that so many other women stepped forward, not only against Harvey Weinstein, but so many other prominent, players that had been committing these acts for a long time, but nobody had stepped forward. And now women felt powerful enough to step forward because they weren't alone.
Yeah.
Also, because of them stepping forward, there has been so many new laws that have been created as a result of it, right? Before there was one of the questions that came up after the Harvey Weinstein case was, how was it all confidential? How did nobody know about this? How did these acts keep going on? And it was because there was these confidentiality agreements that prevented women from talking about it after they signed a settlement. And two, these cases went into arbitration where they weren't public. And so the laws that were created after this movement was no longer can sexual harassment or sex assault cases go into arbitration. So they can always be publicly filed if the survivor chooses to publicly file it. And two, you cannot have these confidentiality provisions that prevent you from talking about your lived experience. And to me, that's huge, that movements that happened as a result of the women stepping forward. So even though that case was reversed, there was so much other impact and change that they brought to me, which is justice for a lot of other people.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know the second shift in the confidentiality agreements, and I don't know how you feel, and I'm curious, but I'll give my opinion. I think with what we're witnessing in kind of the time space reality that we're living in, there's almost like this purging of secrets that's occurring. It's like everything that's at the bottom is churning its way up. And even in my own life, I'm like, there's no more room for like dishonesty or hiding from myself. And in the public space, it seems that same thing is true as well. So I'm curious what your view is on what's going on, and if it's like that or something completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really a result of social media, right? Like you can't really hide from the public anymore. Somebody will find it. Um, And so I think it's refreshing to not have the secrets and not be hiding from it anymore. I think hopefully we become better as a society because of it. But I think time will tell where that takes us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, amazing. Well, I would love to just open up the floor for anything that you would like to share without, me leading the conversation.
Sure. I mean, I think I always like to leave people with kind of like start something now, right? Like if you feel like you're stuck and you don't know what to do and you're feeling, depressed or anxious and you're having these experiences where you're not feeling like you're living your best life or your most fulfilled life, I say, like, take some action now, right? Like, if you're continuing to be in the same circle, you're right, nothing's going to change. So you kind of have to get out of that circle and do something different that you haven't done before and try it and see where that leads you. And not to wait for somebody to, tell you what to do or how to do it. It's like you're going to have to just kind of take a leap, and do something different to kind of change the trajectory of where you're at.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. Really, we have to be our own advocates. And I think that when we show up for ourselves, others start to appear on that path. Absolutely. And I know we kind of touched on this when you were describing um, some inner child work, but if you could go back in time today and give a younger you some words of wisdom, to what age would you go back and what would you say?
Oh, wow. Um, I have this note to myself, that I keep actually on my desk, and I always tell myself, there are going to be things that you don't like about yourself, and there are going to be things you're going to want to change, and you have the power to change them. You got to just do the work and change them. So when you're unhappy in your life, um, then do something about it, right? I live by that motto: be the change you wish to see in the world. And that's just a good reminder to myself of, like, one, modeling the behavior for my daughter, of like, yes, some things are going to require more work, that you have to focus on for yourself. So that's the advice I give my younger self is, like, one, it's going to be okay. But two, yeah, you're going to have to do some work, but continue on it because it will be very fulfilling at the end.
Yeah, I think that's such sound advice. It's so true. Like, no one's coming to rescue you. You've got to do it yourself, sis.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I wish somebody was going to come and rescue you, but nope, you just do it. And then it's a process, right? Like, this idea that it's not overnight. Like, my first therapy, when I first started going to therapy, I saw the therapist and I was like, hey, I'm going to be here. I want, this is at the time I had my daughter, and I wasn't like experiencing motherhood like I thought I should, where, like, her cries were, like, making me cringe. And so I started therapy because of that, because I wanted to be a better mom and wanted to know how to be a better parent, or how to parent, really. So when I got there, I was like, all right, we got 4 sessions. I'm going to tell you what happened when I was a kid. And then by the end of the 4th session, I figure I'll be good and I'll be on my way. And he just laughed at me. And I was like, I didn't know what was so funny. But but obviously I still go to therapy now. It's not overnight. Different things come up. But it is definitely worth it. And for me, it's stopping the generational trauma. Again, I didn't realize it when I went in to therapy. That's what I was doing. But that's what I've done, in essence, by doing the work for myself. I've now not passed it on to my daughter.
Yeah, what a beautiful recognition. And yeah, I want to just pause and applaud you for taking that bold step and continuing to stay. I know what it's like to just continue on and, like, mine and just see and have that beautiful support system. And it feels very nourishing to the soul. And I'm sure your daughter's very grateful, or will be.
Will
Very
be, yeah, will be.
Oh, amazing. Beautiful. Well, I want to just, before we go, I know we've talked about the book a little bit, but I want to give it a bit more attention so the audience can really, like, suss out that it's for them or not. So do you mind just sharing a bit more about what it's about?
Sure. So the book is called Fired Up: Fueling Triumph from Trauma. And I go through my personal journey to help women being able to get on their journey, right? I'm giving you a roadmap of how to speak up and how to stand up for yourself, and kind of what you will experience as a result of it. So you can find it on Amazon. You can find me on my website, which is Alreen, ALREEN.com, and reach out to me if you have any questions.
That's so beautiful. Well, I thank you so much, Alreen, for being here and sharing your story with her drive. Again, I'll just open up the floor if there's anything else you care to share.
I'm good. I really appreciated being on here, and thank you for sharing yourself with me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such an empowering, beautiful story. I love the work that you're doing. We need more humans out there kind of advocating for women and for survivors, victims and survivors, I'll say, and really changing our mindset from victim to survivor, because I think that's where the healing really is.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to this episode of Her Drive. Please leave a review, visit Alreen's website, and absolutely, if this conversation has sparked something inside of you, I recommend picking up her book. And again, if there's someone who you think this episode would land well with and really nourish their soul, I invite you to give it a share. Thanks and take care. Yay.